What if I told you that the silence you once feared, the silence you filled with noise and distraction and the voices of others, has become something else entirely now, and you didn't even notice the moment it changed? What if the very thing you ran from for years, perhaps decades, has quietly transformed into something you now seek, something you recognize not as emptiness, but as a kind of fullness you cannot name? Most people live their entire lives without noticing this shift, not because it doesn't happen, but because we were taught to look outward, to measure our growth by external markers, by achievements and relationships, and the approval we gather like coins in our pockets. We are not taught to feel the subtle reorganization happening beneath the surface of our days, the way our inner landscape rearranges itself in the dark, the way silence stops being a void and becomes a presence. There is a moment, and you may have already lived it without recognizing it, when you sit alone in a room and realize you are not waiting for anything. You are not checking your phone out of compulsion. You are not filling the air with music or podcasts or the television murmuring in the background. You are simply there, and the silence around you feels neither hostile nor empty. It feels like breath. It feels like the pause between heartbeats. And in that pause, something ancient in you remembers that this is where you have always belonged. This is not loneliness. This is not the silence of abandonment or the silence that follows loss, though you have known those silences too. This is different. This silence has texture. It has weight. It feels like the ground beneath your feet after years of floating. Nothing about this is accidental. The way you have arrived here, in this new relationship with silence, is not random. It is the result of 1,000 small deaths, 1,000 moments when you chose, consciously or not, to stop running. You may not have called it that at the time. You may have thought you were simply tired, or that you had finally given up on something, or that life had forced your hand. But beneath the surface, something deeper was at work. The part of you that knows, the part that has always known, was guiding you toward this threshold. And now you stand on the other side of it, looking back at the person you were, the person who could not bear to be alone with themselves, and you feel something close to compassion. You understand now why you ran. You understand the terror of meeting yourself without the armor of busyness, without the distraction of other people's needs and voices filling the space where your own voice should have been. Carl Jung spent much of his life exploring the interior territories that most people avoid. He understood that the unconscious does not speak in the language of logic or reason. It speaks in symbols, in dreams, in the recurring patterns that weave through our lives like threads in a tapestry we cannot see until we step back far enough. He understood that what we call coincidence is often synchronicity, a meaningful alignment between our inner state and the outer world, a sign that something beneath the surface is trying to reach us. And he understood that the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the world, is not the same as the self, that deeper center of being that exists beneath all our roles and identities. The journey toward the self, Jung knew, requires us to descend. It requires us to face the parts of ourselves we have exiled, the shadow aspects we have denied, the silence we have filled with noise because we were afraid of what we might hear in it. You may have noticed that something has shifted in you recently, or perhaps over the past few years. You may not be able to name it precisely, but you feel in the way you move through your days, in the choices you make, in the things that no longer interest you the way they once did. In this exploration, I will share with you several signs, several inner shifts that indicate you are no longer running from silence, that you have crossed a threshold you did not know you were approaching. These are not instructions. They are recognitions. They are mirrors held up to experiences you may have already lived but not yet understood. I invite you to stay with this, to let these words move slowly through you, to notice what resonates and what resists. By the end, you may find that recent experiences, moments you dismissed as insignificant or confusing, were actually part of a larger pattern, a deeper preparation for the life you are becoming capable of living. The first sign is that you no longer feel the need to explain yourself in the way you once did. There was a time when silence in a conversation felt like failure, like a gap that needed to be filled immediately with words, with justifications, with the performance of being understood. You would over-explain your decisions, your feelings, your reasons for doing or not doing something, as though your existence required constant validation from others. But now, something has changed. You notice that when someone misunderstands you, or when someone projects their own interpretations onto your choices, you feel less compelled to correct them. You let their version of you exist separately from the truth you know. This is not apathy. This is not withdrawal. This is a deep, quiet confidence that has grown in you like a root system beneath the soil. You have begun to trust that you do not need to be seen accurately by everyone in order to exist fully. This shift often comes after years of exhausting yourself trying to be understood. You have sat across from people in coffee shops and living rooms and late-night conversations, trying to articulate something essential about yourself, only to see your words land in the wrong place, to watch them be misinterpreted or dismissed or reshaped into something unrecognizable. And each time, you felt a small death, a small grief, because you believed that being understood was the same as being loved. But slowly, through repetition and disappointment, you began to realize that understanding is not something you can force. It is not something you can earn through better explanations or more precise language. Some people will see you clearly, and others will not. And this is less to do with you than with the lens through which they view the world. And so you began to release the need to be seen in a particular way. You began to let silence hold the space where explanations used to be. In Jungian terms, this is the process of differentiating from the collective, from the expectations and projections that others place upon you. The persona, that social mask, begins to loosen. You realize that the version of yourself you have been performing, the one designed to be palatable and understandable to the widest audience, is not the same as the self. The self does not need to be understood by everyone. The self exists independently of external validation. And when you begin to live from that place, silence becomes easier. It becomes a refuge rather than a threat. You no longer feel the compulsion to fill every pause with words, to justify every choice, to make yourself legible to people who are not equipped to read you. You trust that the right people, the ones who matter, will see you without you having to perform or explain. And the others, the ones who misunderstand, are allowed to carry their version of you without it diminishing the truth of who you are. But this shift is not always comfortable. There are moments when the old habit resurfaces, when you feel the familiar panic rising in your chest during a conversation that is not going the way you hoped. You feel the urge to explain, to clarify, to make sure the other person understands what you meant. And sometimes you give in to that urge, and afterward you feel a strange exhaustion, a sense that you have betrayed something in yourself by trying so hard to be seen. Other times, you manage to hold the silence, to let the misunderstanding exist, and you walk away feeling both liberated and lonely. Because there is a loneliness in this, a recognition that you're more alone than you thought, that fewer people truly see you than you hoped. But this loneliness is different from the loneliness you felt before. It is not the loneliness of abandonment. It is the loneliness of individuation, the necessary solitude that comes with becoming yourself. The second sign is that you have stopped filling your days with noise out of fear. There was a time when silence felt dangerous, when being alone with your thoughts was something to avoid at all costs. You would wake up and immediately reach for your phone, flooding your mind with information and images and the curated lives of others before you even had a chance to feel your own life. You would drive with the radio on, cook with a podcast playing, fall asleep to the television, anything to avoid the quiet. Because in the quiet, things rose to the surface. Feelings you had been avoiding, memories you had buried, questions you did not want to answer. The noise was a barrier, a way of keeping the unconscious at bay, of maintaining the illusion that you were fine, that everything was under control. But now, you find yourself seeking silence. You turn off the music halfway through a drive and realize you prefer the sound of the road, the hum of the engine, the space to think. You sit in your home in the evening without turning on the television, and instead of feeling restless or anxious, you feel a strange calm. You notice the quality of light changing as the sun sets. You notice your own breathing. You notice thoughts moving through your mind like clouds, and you do not feel compelled to chase them or push them away. You simply watch. This is not something you decided to do. It is not a practice you read about and implemented. It happened organically, as though your nervous system finally felt safe enough to stop defending itself against the quiet. This shift often follows a period of crisis or transformation. Perhaps you experienced a loss, a breakup, an illness, a moment when the structures of your life collapsed and you were forced to sit in the rubble. In those moments, noise does not help. Distraction does not work. You are too raw, too exposed, and the only thing you can do is endure. And in that endurance, something unexpected happens. You discover that you can survive the silence. You discover that the things you were afraid of, the feelings and memories and questions, are not as overwhelming as you thought. They are painful, yes, but they are also finite. They rise, they peak, they subside. And in the spaces between them, you find something else, a stillness, a presence, a sense of your own existence that is not dependent on external stimulation or validation. Jung called this the descent into the unconscious, the necessary journey into the shadow, into the parts of ourselves we have repressed or denied. He understood that we cannot become whole by avoiding the darkness. We must enter it, sit with it, allow it to speak. And silence is the doorway. In silence, the unconscious has room to emerge. The dreams become more vivid. The intuitions become clearer. The symbols and patterns that have been trying to reach us finally have space to be seen. But most people never make this descent because the fear is too great. They fill their lives with noise and busyness and distraction, and they wonder why they feel so disconnected, so hollow, so lost. They do not realize that the very thing they are running from is the thing that could save them. You may still have moments when the old fear returns, when the silence feels too heavy and you reach for your phone or turn on the television out of habit. But now you notice it. You catch yourself in the act. And sometimes you pause, you put the phone down, you turn off the screen, and you sit with the discomfort. You breathe through it. You let it be there without needing to fix it or escape it. And gradually, the discomfort softens. The silence stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a companion. You realize that you are not alone in the silence. You are with yourself, and for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. The third sign is that you have begun to notice the difference between loneliness and solitude. For years, they felt like the same thing. Being alone meant being lonely, meant something was wrong, meant you were failing at the fundamental human task of connection. You would look at other people who seemed to have full social lives, who were always surrounded by friends and family, and you would feel a deep shame about your own need for solitude. You would force yourself to go to gatherings you did not want to attend, to say yes to invitations that drained you, because you believed that being a good person meant being social, meant being available, meant never choosing yourself over others. But now, you understand that solitude is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is a feeling of disconnection, a longing for contact that is not being met. Solitude is a choice, a deliberate withdrawal into your own company, a recognition that you need time alone not because you are broken or antisocial, but because it is in solitude that you reconnect with yourself. You have begun to protect your solitude, to carve out time for it, to say no to things that would intrude upon it. And instead of feeling guilty, you feel relief. You feel a deep, cellular relief, as though your body has been waiting for you to finally understand this. This distinction often becomes clear after you have experienced both states in close succession. You spend an evening alone and feel peaceful, engaged in your own thoughts, content with your own company. Then you spend another evening alone and feel desperately lonely, aching for connection, scrolling through your phone, looking for someone to reach out to. The external circumstances are the same, but the internal experience is completely different. And you begin to realize that the difference is not about whether you are alone, but about whether you are home with yourself. Solitude is only nourishing when you have done the work of befriending yourself, of learning to be good company for yourself. Otherwise, being alone is just another form of exile. Jung spoke about the importance of the inner relationship, the relationship between the ego and the self, between the conscious mind and the deeper layers of the psyche. He understood that most people project this relationship outward, seeking in others what they have not cultivated within themselves. They look for a partner to complete them, a friend to understand them, a community to validate them. And while external relationships are important, they cannot substitute for the inner relationship. If you have not learned to sit with yourself, to listen to yourself, to hold space for your own complexity, then no amount of external connection will fill the void. You will always feel lonely, even in a crowd, because the fundamental disconnection is internal. You may have noticed that as you have become more comfortable with solitude, your relationships have changed. Some friendships have faded, not because of conflict or betrayal, but because they were based on a version of you that no longer exists. You used to say yes to everything, to be available at all times, to prioritize other people's needs over your own. And certain people became accustomed to that version of you. They expected you to be the listener, the helper, the one who always showed up. But now you have boundaries. You say no more often. You prioritize your own time and energy. And some people do not know what to do with this new version of you. They feel rejected, even though you have not rejected them. They feel abandoned, even though you are simply choosing yourself. And you feel the pain of this, the grief of outgrowing relationships that once felt essential. But you also feel the rightness of it, the sense that you are finally living in alignment with your own truth. At the same time, other relationships have deepened. The people who can meet you in your solitude, who do not take your need for alone time personally, who understand that your withdrawal is not about them, these people become more precious. You realize that true intimacy does not require constant contact. It does not require you to be always available. It requires honesty, presence, and the ability to hold space for each other's complexity. And when you find people who can do this, who can love you without needing you to perform or explain or justify your need for silence, you feel a gratitude so deep it almost hurts. The fourth sign is that you have stopped using busyness as a badge of honor. There was a time when you measured your worth by how much you could accomplish, how many tasks you could complete, how full your calendar was. You wore your exhaustion like a medal, proof that you were important, needed, valuable. You believed that rest was something you had to earn, that you could only allow yourself to stop once everything was done. But everything was never done. The list kept growing. The demands kept coming. And you kept pushing, kept overriding your body's signals, kept ignoring the fatigue and the tension and the quiet voice inside you that kept whispering, "This is not sustainable." But now something has shifted. You have begun to see busyness for what it is, a defense mechanism, a way of avoiding the deeper questions, a way of proving your worth in a culture that equates productivity with value. You have begun to notice how busyness keeps you on the surface of your life, skimming across the days without ever diving deep, without ever stopping long enough to feel what you are actually feeling. And you have begun to choose differently. You say no to commitments that do not serve you. You leave space in your calendar. You allow yourself to rest, not because you have earned it, but because you are a human being who needs rest. And in that rest, in that spaciousness, you begin to hear yourself again. This shift is often accompanied by guilt. You feel guilty for not doing more, for not being more productive, for letting people down, for not living up to the expectations you have internalized. You feel guilty for resting when there is still work to be done, for choosing a walk in the park over another hour at your desk, for prioritizing your own well-being over the endless demands of the world. But beneath the guilt, there is a deeper knowing. You know that you cannot keep living the way you were living. You know that the pace you were maintaining was not sustainable, that it was costing you your health, your relationships, your connection to yourself. And so you choose rest, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when the guilt whispers that you're lazy or selfish or not enough. Jung understood that the psyche requires rest in order to integrate. The unconscious does not operate on the same timeline as the conscious mind. It needs space, silence, stillness in order to process and reorganize. When we are constantly busy, constantly stimulated, constantly moving, the unconscious cannot do its work. The dreams become fragmented. The intuitions get drowned out. The symbols and patterns that are trying to emerge get buried beneath the noise. And we wonder why we feel so disconnected, so lost, so out of touch with ourselves. We do not realize that we have been running so fast that we have left ourselves behind. You may have noticed that as you have slowed down, as you have created more space in your life, things have begun to surface. Memories from childhood, feelings you thought you dealt with, questions about your life, your choices, your direction. At first, this can feel overwhelming. You may wonder if you made a mistake, if you should go back to being busy, because at least then you did not have to feel all of this. But if you can stay with it, if you can allow the surfacing without trying to push it back down, something remarkable happens. The feelings move through you. The memories are integrated. The questions begin to clarify, and you start to feel more whole, more present, more alive. You realize that the busyness was not protecting you. It was numbing you. And now that you have stopped running, you are finally able to feel your life. The fifth sign is that you have developed a different relationship with your own thoughts. There was a time when your mind felt like a battlefield, a constant stream of judgment and criticism and worry. You would lie awake at night, replaying conversations, analyzing mistakes, imagining worst-case scenarios. Your thoughts felt like an enemy, something to be controlled or silenced or escaped. You tried meditation, affirmations, positive thinking, anything to stop the relentless chatter. And sometimes these practices helped, but often they just added another layer of pressure, another thing you were failing at, because your mind would not cooperate, would not quiet down, would not stop tormenting you. But now, you have begun to relate to your thoughts differently. You have begun to see them not as truth, but as phenomena, as events arising in consciousness that you can observe without identifying with them. You notice a thought of self-criticism, and instead of believing it, instead of letting it spiral into a story about how you are not good enough, you simply note it. There is the critic again. There is the voice that says I am failing. And you let it be there without giving it power, without engaging with it, without trying to argue it away. You have learned that thoughts are not facts. They are habits, patterns, echoes of old conditioning, and they do not require your allegiance. This shift often comes after a period of intense mental suffering, a time when your thoughts became so loud and so painful that you had no choice but to find a different way of relating to them. Perhaps you experienced anxiety or depression, a time when your mind turned against you so completely that you could not function. And in that darkness, you were forced to develop new tools, new ways of holding your experience. You learned to create distance between yourself and your thoughts. You learned that you're not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise. And this distinction, simple as it sounds, changes everything. Jung spoke about the observing ego, the part of us that can witness our own psychological processes without being consumed by them. This is not the same as dissociation or detachment. It is a grounded presence, a capacity to be with what is without being overwhelmed by it. And it is this capacity that allows us to sit in silence without being terrorized by our own minds. Because silence, when you are at war with your thoughts, is unbearable. It is an amplification of a noise inside. But when you have learned to observe your thoughts with some degree of neutrality, silence becomes spacious. It becomes a place where you can rest, where you can simply be, without the constant pressure to manage or control or fix your inner experience. You may still have difficult days, days when the thoughts are louder and more persistent, when the old patterns reassert themselves with a vengeance. But even on those days, something is different. You know that the thoughts will pass. You know that you have survived this before. You know that you're not your thoughts, even when they feel overwhelming. And this knowing, this deeper trust, allows you to sit with the difficulty without adding the layer of panic that used to accompany it. You do not need to fix it immediately. You do not need to make it go away. You can let it be there, let it move through you, and trust that on the other side there will be space again, silence again, the quiet presence that is always there beneath the noise. The sixth sign is that you have begun to trust your own rhythms instead of forcing yourself to conform to external expectations. There was a time when you believed that there was a right way to live, a correct schedule to follow, a proper pace at which to move through your days. You try to wake up early because that is what successful people do. You try to be social because that is what healthy people do. You try to maintain a consistent routine because that is what disciplined people do. And when you could not sustain these patterns, when your body and mind rebelled, you felt like a failure. You believed that something was wrong with you, that you lacked willpower or motivation or the basic capacity to function like a normal person. But now, you have begun to understand that you have your own rhythms, your own cycles, your own way of moving through time. You have noticed that you are more creative at certain times of day, more social during certain seasons, more introspective during certain phases of your life. And instead of fighting these rhythms, instead of trying to override them with external structures. You have begun to honor them. You rest when you need to rest. You withdraw when you need to withdraw. You engage when you have the energy to engage. And you trust that this is not laziness or self-indulgence, but a form of self-knowledge, a way of living in alignment with your own nature. This shift requires you to let go of a lot of conditioning, a lot of internalized messages about what you should be doing and how you should be living. You have to release the idea that there is one right way to structure a life. You have to stop comparing yourself to people who operate on different rhythms, who have different needs and capacities. You have to trust that your way is valid, even if it does not look like anyone else's way. And this is harder than it sounds, because we are social creatures, and we are wired to look to others for cues about what is normal and acceptable. But when you finally give yourself permission to live according to your own rhythms, something inside you relaxes. You stop fighting yourself. You stop trying to be someone you are not. And you begin to experience a kind of ease that you did not know was possible. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming yourself, requires you to differentiate from the collective, to stop living according to the expectations and norms of the culture, and to start living according to your own inner truth. This does not mean rejecting all external structures or becoming a hermit. It means discerning which structures serve you and which ones constrain you. It means honoring your own needs and rhythms, even when they do not align with what is considered normal or productive. And it means trusting that your way of being in the world is valid, even if it is unconventional, even if it confuses or disappoints other people. You may have noticed that as you have begun to honor your own rhythms, some people have become uncomfortable. They do not understand why you are not available at the times you used to be available. They do not understand why you need so much alone time, or why you're not interested in the activities you used to participate in. And their discomfort can trigger your own doubt. You wonder if you're being selfish, if you're withdrawing too much, if you're making a mistake. But beneath the doubt, there is a deeper knowing. You know that you're finally listening to yourself. You know that you're finally living in a way that feels true. And even though it is uncomfortable, even though it requires you to disappoint people and let go of old patterns, you know that you cannot go back to living the way you were living. You have crossed a threshold, and there is no return. The seventh sign is that silence has become generative rather than empty. There was a time when silence felt like a void, a lack, an absence of something that should be there. You equated silence with stagnation, with loneliness, with the feeling that nothing was happening. But now, you have begun to notice that some of your most important insights, your deepest feelings, your most creative ideas, emerge from silence. You sit quietly, without agenda, without trying to produce anything, and something rises from within. A memory, a realization, a sense of direction. You do not know where it comes from. It is not the result of logical thinking or deliberate effort. It simply arrives, like a gift, like a message from a part of yourself you did not know was listening. This is the silence that artists and writers and mystics have always known. The silence that is not empty but full, pregnant with possibility. It is the silence in which the unconscious can speak, in which intuition can emerge, in which the deeper layers of the psyche can make themselves known. But you cannot access this silence if you are running from it, if you are filling every moment with noise and distraction. You have to be willing to sit in the not knowing, to tolerate the discomfort of having no clear direction, to trust that something is happening even when you cannot see it. And this requires a kind of faith, a willingness to surrender control, to let go of the need to always be doing and producing and moving forward. You may have experienced this in moments of crisis or transition, times when the old structures of your life fell away and you were left in a kind of liminal space, not knowing what comes next. At first, this space felt terrifying. You wanted answers, clarity, a plan. You wanted to know where you were going and how you were going to get there. But the answers did not come. The clarity did not arrive. And you were forced to sit in the uncertainty, to live in the questions, to trust that the path would reveal itself in time. And slowly, gradually, something began to shift. You stopped fighting the not knowing. You stopped trying to force clarity. And in that surrender, in that willingness to be with the uncertainty, things began to emerge. Insights, intuitions, a sense of direction that was not logical but felt true. You realized that the silence was not empty. It was working on you, preparing you, reorganizing you from the inside out. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's capacity to generate new possibilities, to create bridges between opposing forces, to bring forth something that did not exist before. But this function can only operate when we create space for it, when we stop trying to control and manage and figure everything out. It requires us to trust the process, to trust that the unconscious knows what it is doing, even when we do not. And it requires us to sit in the silence, to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing, to allow the generative darkness to do its work. You may still have moments when the silence feels empty, when you doubt that anything is happening, when you wonder if you're just wasting time. But more and more, you trust the process. You trust that the silence is not a void, but a womb, a place where something new is being formed. You trust that the insights will come when they are ready, that the direction will reveal itself in time, that you do not need to force or rush or control. And in that trust, you find a kind of peace, a willingness to let your life unfold at its own pace, in its own way. All of these signs, these shifts, these subtle reorganizations of your inner world, they're not separate. They are part of a single process, a single movement toward wholeness, toward the self. You are no longer running from silence because you have begun to understand that silence is not the enemy. It is not a void to be filled or a threat to be avoided. It is the ground of your being, the place where you meet yourself, the space in which the deeper layers of your psyche can emerge and be integrated. And this process, this journey toward silence, toward solitude, toward the willingness to be with yourself without distraction or defense, this is not a withdrawal from life. It is a return to life, a return to the fullness and depth and presence that you lost when you were running. You may not have chosen this path consciously. You may have been forced onto it by circumstance, by loss, by the collapse of the structures you built to keep yourself safe. But now that you are here, now that you have crossed this threshold, you begin to see that it was not a mistake. It was not a failure. It was a necessary descent, a necessary stripping away, a necessary confrontation with the parts of yourself you have been avoiding. And on the other side of that confrontation, you find something unexpected. Not happiness, not the absence of struggle, but a deeper sense of being at home with yourself, a capacity to sit with your own experience without needing to escape or fix or change it. You find that silence is no longer something to fear. It is something to cherish, to protect, to return to again and again. If you are recognizing yourself in these words, if you're seeing your own experience reflected back to you, then you're already in this process. You're already being reorganized from within. And the invitation now is simply to notice, to pay attention, to honor what is happening inside you. You do not need to do anything. You do not need to fix or improve or accelerate the process. You simply need to be present to it, to allow it to unfold, to trust that you're being guided by something deeper than your conscious mind, something that has always known the way home. One of the simplest practices you can engage with is just noticing when you reach for distraction out of habit and pausing before you do. Notice the impulse to fill the silence, to check your phone, to turn on the television, and instead of acting on it immediately, just sit with it for a moment. Feel the discomfort, feel the urge, and then choose, consciously, whether to follow it or to let it pass. This is not about forcing yourself to sit in silence when you genuinely need rest or connection. It is about becoming aware of the automatic patterns, the ways you have been running without even knowing you were running. Another practice is simply to write, not with any agenda, not to produce anything meaningful or coherent, but just to let your hand move across the page and see what emerges. Write about the silence. Write about what it feels like in your body. Write about the fears that come up, the resistances, the moments when you want to run. Write about the moments when the silence feels like home. Do not edit. Do not judge. Just let the words come, and trust that in the act of writing, you are creating a bridge between your conscious mind and the deeper layers of your psyche. You are giving voice to things that have been waiting to be spoken. And finally, simply sit. Sit in a room with no agenda, no phone, no book, no distraction. Sit and breathe and notice what arises. Notice the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations in your body. Notice the impulse to get up and do something. Notice the discomfort, the restlessness, the fear, and just let it all be there. You do not need to fix it or change it or make it go away. You just need to be with it, to hold space for it, to allow your own experience to exist without judgment or resistance. And in that simple act of sitting, of being present to yourself, you are practicing the most radical thing you can practice in this culture. You are practicing the art of being with yourself, of not running, of letting silence be your teacher. If this exploration has resonated with you, if you have felt something shift or open or clarify as you have listened, I invite you to stay connected. There is so much more to explore, so many more layers to this process of coming home to yourself. Subscribe if you want to continue this journey together. Like this if it spoke to something true in you. And if you feel moved to, share your own experience in the comments. Tell me about your relationship with silence. Tell me about the moment you stopped running. Your words may be exactly what someone else needs to hear. The recognition that they are not alone in this process, that what they are experiencing is not a mistake, but a profound and necessary transformation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sitting with these words, for allowing them to move through you, for trusting that something beneath the surface is guiding you home.